Hey everyone, I'm working on an immersive sim FPS similar to Half-Life and Deus Ex, but with faster paced combat and retro graphics. I started off the month by remaking the enemy models, and I know you guys don't care much for graphical updates, but this model was made at the very start of development and was pretty crappy at this point. So I first made some minor changes, mostly just upping the poly count and smoothing edges, things like that. And after I got the new model done, I retextured it in Substance Painter. Overall, the new model is a whole lot more detailed, with dirt and grime everywhere, stitches on clothing, and in general, just a better design. This entire remake was in preparation for new enemy types that I was going to work on in the future, which would be based off the same model and texture. I also split up the enemy model into parts so I could swap out the helmet and armor for different variants of the enemy. So I wrote a little script that takes the separate meshes and attaches it to the main skeleton. So now I could just have separate armor meshes that I could just drag and drop onto the main enemy model. And all of this preparation was for new enemy types. So, speaking of new enemy types, I decided to make a heavy enemy. I first started by making the heavy enemy helmet and armor. Using the same system as before, I could just throw these onto the base model using the mesh script. Then, I had to figure out how to make this heavy enemy heavy. Looking at other games, I find that the heavy enemies are really boring. In most games, they're just the same base enemy, but with a different model and more health, which honestly would be easy to add, but boring. So what I wanted to do was basically take the base enemy and add armor pieces until it became a heavy enemy. The difference between this approach and other games is that the armor would actually be separate pieces on top of the base enemy. So what this allows the player to do is specifically target and shoot around armor pieces, which provides a lot more tactility when fighting heavy enemies. This also lets you use higher penetration weapons like the sniper to penetrate through the armor, which adds a lot more utility to those weapons. All of this is being controlled by my armor system, which just takes in a bone name and adds colliders on top of existing bones, which lets me easily add a whole list of armor pieces. All of this work culminated in a fun to fight heavy enemy. Currently, the heavy enemy still uses regular enemy weapons, but in the future, I wanted to carry the shotgun or some heavy weapon like that. But anyways, after fixing up the enemy models, I thought that the dismemberment system was pretty jank. So, as well as cleaning up the code a bit, I made new gore ends for each of the limbs. The spine now reveals a spine, the head now reveals a jaw, and so on. In general, the dismemberments just look a whole lot better. But moving on from enemies, one thing that you've probably noticed is that the level is completely overhauled. For about a week, I was trying different ways of making levels to see what was best for me. I needed something that was easy to make, looked good, and was easy to iterate on. In previous videos, which you should go watch, you'd see that I had two approaches to building levels. First, I had these buildings, which were entirely made using ProBuilder, which had the benefit of being easy to make and iterate on, but they didn't look that great. So then I made these apartments, being entirely built with props. They looked great, but making the tile set took like a week, and iterating, placing separate pieces of the apartment was very slow. So using ProBuilder was fast, but didn't look good, and using props was slow, but looked good. So I brainstormed for a bit. I started looking at different architectural styles, and then I found Brutalism, an architectural style that emerged in the 50s in the UK after World War II. I found that brutalist architecture was actually really easy to replicate and make look good, as it used a lot of primitive shapes. Most of the building is built using ProBuilder, which is easy to work with. And then props are added on top to make it look good, like window frames, roof trimmings, and interior props. With this structure in place, I should be able to easily and quickly make interesting layouts and good-looking buildings. I then spent a bit of time working on a vine generator so the walls didn't look so bland. Which, by the way, if you guys want to see a tutorial on the vine generator, let me know and I'll make one. But anyways, after that, I then turned the autumn trees to summer trees, just because in my area it's getting warm and I'm in a summer mood. But moving on from the level, I wanted to make a new weapon, the Boss U Revolver. Like all things in the game, I started off by modeling, then texturing, then animating it. And bam, now it's in the game. But with the revolver, I wanted the cylinder to actually work, having the player fill each bullet individually. And to do this, I realized I would have to write a bunch of spaghetti code to make each reloading step work. So I then decided to write an action system. The system takes in a time and specific methods to execute, so I can create an object that stores all the information on any given action, and then I could just call that object to be run. which is super clean and lets me write the whole reload system in just a couple of lines. So I got the Revolver reload working. The player now ejects all the shells and then puts each bullet in individually until he runs out of bullets or the revolver is full. The only thing is, I realized that the system is so much better than what I had before, and I wanted to implement it everywhere. So what ended up happening is that for every single weapon, I created actions for attacking, reloading, and weapon equipping. So for each action in each weapon, I had to set when sounds are played, shells were ejected, and things like that, which took like a whole week. So that sucked. But the good thing is now I can just drag and drop weapon actions, which will make making new weapons a whole lot easier in the future. The last thing that I worked on after being burnt out with remaking all the weapons was a procedural level generator. Keep in mind, this probably isn't going to be in the game. I kind of just did this for fun. But it's pretty fun to mess around with. The levels are completely random. I don't put any presets in, so you can find some pretty cool layouts. But playing with it and running through it, I realized that I was missing a lot of jumps that I thought I could make, which felt really crappy. So I decided to make a player mount system, which lets you mount on top of nearby ledges. And now, near miss jumps never really happen, and in general, the movement feels a lot smoother. Anyways, that's it. Thanks for watching the whole video, as this was a pretty long one. It's been a while since my last video, so I had quite a bit to show. But if you haven't seen my last video, you should go click there to go watch it. And if you have seen my last video, you should click there to subscribe. Also, follow me on Twitter at SitskyDev. I post there pretty regularly. Anyways, see ya.